Stop relying on external news sources. Asia Vision, Asian news through Asian eyes. For over 30 years, we have been getting stronger and faster. This year alone, we have added 4 new members, increasing our total to 30 members, contributing and exchanging news material every day. But our influence is just not limited to the region. We have been expanding our network across the globe. In the Middle East and Northern Africa, we have Sister Union, Arab States Broadcasting Union, sharing news with us daily. In Europe, we exchange news with over 60 different European broadcasters, and in America, CNN receives news materials from AVN and broadcasts them all over the world. Asian news is changing faster and having more of an impact on global affairs than ever before. Through improvements in technology, journalists are able to submit and access more news stories and receive updates faster through our newly integrated internet-based platform. The new internet platform has made it easier to contribute and access current news events, and the rise of membership participation has led to a dramatic increase of items being exchanged over the last year. With the exchange of news comes the exchange of ideas. Members can also benefit from AVN journalist workshops and attachment schemes in our bid to create partnerships, spread knowledge, and elevate standards. So, contribute your views in global affairs and join us as we document history in the making. Asia Vision, Asian news through Asian eyes.
Hello and welcome to AVN News with me, Mariam Shawshat. Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai concludes her first trip back to her native Pakistan, which also took the education activist to her home district of Swat, where she was shot in the head 6 years ago by the outlawed Pakistani Taliban for advocating rights and education for girls. She was airlifted in a coma to Britain for an emergency surgery and has since been living there and studying at Oxford University. Ayaz Gul reports from Islamabad.
Malala returned to Pakistan as a state guest and spent her time in the country with extremely tight security around her. The 20-year-old Nobel laureate travelled to Swat, once a militant stronghold. She was accompanied by her parents and 2 brothers to her home in the valley.
And it is still as beautiful as it was. It was springtime, so it was even more beautiful, and the mountains were green, flowers and fragrance all around, and I visited my home. I saw my neighbors and friends, and everyone was so happy but emotional as well. And I went to my room, I saw my old school trophies, my drawing, and just try to remember each and every day in how we lived in that house for before I was attacked.
Malala was returning home from her school in October 2012 when a gunman intercepted her packed school van and shot her. Pakistan touts Swat as a success story in its long war against religious extremism, though the US and others allege the country's northwestern regions bordering Afghanistan remain a safe haven for militancy. The Pakistani Taliban used to control or influence much of Swat until 2009, when a military-led operation was launched and cleared the valley of the militants. The offensive had briefly uprooted nearly 2 million people at the time.
So my trip was important to give the message that there is peace in Pakistan. The people of Pakistan, they have stood against extremists. Even in Swat Valley, when people left their homes and became IDPs for 3 months, that was a message to say that we do not agree with these extremists and their ideology, that we are happy to sacrifice our homes, but we are not ready to live with them in that situation.
Malala says she intends to regularly come back to Pakistan to oversee education projects her organization, the Malala Fund, has undertaken in Swat.
Because if a girl is not getting to a safe school, she's more likely to get married at the age of 13 and 14. She's more likely to be in child labor. She's more likely to be in poverty. She's more likely to be not being able to speak out for herself if she's facing any harassment or any violence.
Since being shot, Malala has become an education advocate, turning her into a global symbol for human rights. In 2014, she became the youngest person ever to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize when she was just 17. Ayaz Gul for VOA News, Islamabad.
Asia Vision, Asian news through Asian eyes.
Politicians, rights activists and supporters from around the world pay tribute to South African anti-apartheid campaigner Winnie Madikizela Mandela, who died at the age of 81. Winnie Mandela, a former wife of the first South African black president, Nelson Mandela, was a prominent member of the ruling African National Congress Party and has held several government positions. VOA's Zlatica Hawk reports.
Supporters were singing and dancing outside Winnie Mandela's home Monday night in respect for her lifetime of work on behalf of her people. The crowd partied to make way for the motorcade of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
The death of Winnie Madikizela Mandela is a great loss in that she has been one of the strongest women in our struggle, who suffered immensely under the apartheid regime, who was imprisoned, who was banished, who was treated very badly, separated not only from her husband but from her children as well and her people.
Winnie Mandela was married to Nelson Mandela for 38 years, but he was in jail during most of that time. When he was imprisoned for life in 1964, Winnie continued to fight against apartheid and was jailed, exiled and hounded by the government for her activities. During that time, she gained recognition in the West for her human rights work. Her marriage to Nelson Mandela fell apart soon after his release from prison. She turned out to be less conciliatory than her husband toward the country's white minority. Allegations of torture, kidnapping, corruption and theft led to a lawsuit against Winnie Mandela and the conviction on multiple counts in 2003. Her jail sentence was later suspended after a judge ruled that her crimes were not committed for personal gain. She returned to politics in 2007, and although a polarizing figure, she was seen as an asset to the ruling ANC party.
Mama Winnie Mandela was identified by the masses of our people as the mother of the nation. This was in recognition of a fearless and uncompromising stand that she took against the might of the apartheid regime.
Despite mistakes, Mandela remained an internationally recognized icon of uncompromising struggle against apartheid and for equal rights for the South African black majority.
She was a strong and fearless voice in the struggle for equal rights and will be remembered as a symbol of resistance. The Secretary-General wishes to extend his deepest condolences to the people of South Africa as well as to her family.
Winnie Mandela will be honored by a state funeral on April 14th, preceded by an official memorial service on April 11th. Zlatica Hawk, VOA News, Washington.
The refugee population in Uganda stands at more than 1.4 million and growing, thanks to conflicts in Congo and South Sudan. The influx is forcing Uganda to rethink its decades-old policy of allocating refugees plots of land to live on and farm. For VOA, Halima Athmani reports from Kyangwali refugee settlement in western Uganda.
More Congolese refugees arrive every day. More than 60,000 have crossed into western Uganda since the start of the year. They are fleeing a fresh wave of communal violence in northeastern DRC. Zeimane Emmanuel fled to Uganda in 2014. The government gave him use of a 9 by 9 meter plot of land. The recent ethnic violence has forced his family to join him.
We used to farm, but now the gardens have been reduced because of the influx. They told us we can't continue farming.
Uganda first gave land to refugees in the early 1960s. Ownership remains with the government or host communities, but refugees use the plots for free. The goal is to make refugees self-reliant and able to feed themselves. But amid the influx from Congo, the government says it must redesign some settlements, including Kyangwali,
so that the refugees will not be scattered through the camp like we have to date handled. We are going to reorganize them to the extent that there will be settlement on just one side of the camp, and then 3/4 of the camp should be used for extensive agriculture.
Devota Mparanze Uzamkunda is a mother of 6. She farms and rears some goats and pigs at Kyangwali. She says the doors to the camp remain open.
Sisi wakimbizi If my countrymen comes and they are suffering the same way I suffered when I came here, they will live with me. There is no problem.
The refugee influx from Congo over the past 3 months has already exceeded the UN's projection for all of 2018. And with the violence continuing, still more are expected. Halima Athmani for VA News, Changwali, Uganda.
Asia Vision, Asian news through Asian eyes.
President Donald Trump hosts the leaders of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania for a Baltic summit at the White House as tensions continue to rise between Russia and the West. Ahead of the meeting, Baltic leaders have called on the US to not underestimate the threat from Russia, which they say is conducting hybrid warfare. VOA's diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports from the State Department.
Vice President Mike Pence made clear that the United States stands with the people of the 3 Baltic republics in the face of Russian aggression during his visit to Estonia last summer.
Under President Donald Trump, the United States of America rejects any attempt to use force, threats, intimidation, or malign influence in the Baltic states or against any of our treaty allies.
The Baltic leaders are expected to stress that the U.S. should not underestimate the threat Russia poses to them right now, at a time Moscow is continuing to conduct missile tests in international waters extremely close to Latvia and Sweden. Some experts say a number of NATO countries are concerned about Trump's frequent praise of Russian President Vladimir Putin, but also look to see what action the U.S. is taking.
On the other hand, I do think that the Baltic republics also look at what the U.S. is actually doing in terms of troop rotations to Europe, in terms of exercises in Northern Europe, and there they actually see a lot of U.S. commitment and a lot of serious U.S. effort on bolstering deterrence and security in Northern Europe.
Luke Coffey of the Heritage Foundation says Trump has been tough on Russia.
He just expelled 60 Russian diplomats. He's providing lethal weapons to Ukraine and Georgia.
Most experts agree that the Baltic republics would like to see a permanent U.S. military presence in their countries as a strong signal to Russia, instead of just rotational exercises by NATO.
So I do think that they are very eager to see even a small U.S. presence in the Baltics as a signal of U.S. commitment to their security.
And that's something we've advocated here at the Heritage Foundation, to have a bricks and mortar presence, not just rotational presence of U.S. forces, but forces permanently based in the Baltic states. As long as the Baltic states want us there, we have to be as guests.
The president and the Baltic presidents are also expected to discuss trade, investment, and cultural exchanges. Cindy Sain, VOA News, Washington.
A new coalition of tech giants and conservationists is looking to drastically reduce the amount of wild and often endangered animals that are trafficked via online services. As Veronica Balderas Iglesias reports, they hope to cut 80% of the illegal trade by the end of this decade.
The annual value of the illegal wildlife trade is estimated to be more than $20 billion worldwide. And the tendrils of this black market, the 5th most profitable, have already entered the web.
Because it's more anonymous and it's much easier to trade to a bigger global market. The sorts of wildlife that you see illegally traded are things like elephant ivory, marine turtle shells or carry, even marine turtle eggs, pangolins, the most trafficked mammal in the earth.
Setting their sights on reducing the illegal online trade of these animals by 80% by 2020, the World Wildlife Fund has teamed up with a number of tech giants,
including eBay, Etsy, Microsoft, Google, Alibaba, Tencent, sorts of companies that really have a massive global reach and have presence all over the world. What we're doing here is setting in place a series of policies and procedures to define exactly what is a prohibited item.
Although it was officially launched at the beginning of March, the coalition of private sector tech companies has been experimenting with the strategy for 2 years. And eBay senior manager Mike Carson told VOA it already has concrete results to show for it.
In 2017 alone, we blocked or removed over 45,000 listings on eBay that violate our policy on parts from endangered or threatened species.
Part of this strategy has been to educate clients about the laws and restrictions on these animals.
In those cases where people are actively trying to circumvent our filters, we take harsher action. We can suspend them either temporarily or completely from the site. And we do work with law enforcement as well in certain situations if there's a criminal activity going on.
The members of the coalition are also planning to establish joint alert systems to better counteract the traffickers should they change their modes of operation. Verónica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News.
Well, that's all we have for you in the ABN News, but stay tuned for more news updates. Thank you for joining us. Have a pleasant day ahead. Goodbye.
Asia Vision, Asian news through Asian eyes.